Hey y'all, welcome back to another video. It is me, the mysterious cameraman, and today we are talking about one of my favorite Disney films, which in my opinion is a hidden, underrated masterpiece. The Hunchback of Notre Dame released about 20 years ago, a little bit over at this point. Now that it is 2026, it released back in 1996, and it is, in my opinion, a truly stunning film. Or maybe it's 30 years ago. Maybe Hunchback's 30 years old. That actually is the math. Yeah, it's 30 years old. Never mind. It's not 20, it's 30. But Hunchback is a truly incredible film. I first saw this film only about a year ago at this point because I never really heard of it. I knew it existed. I just didn't know anything about it because it's not a typical Disney film. And this is what I really wanted to talk about in this video. Your typical Disney films, especially the ones that came out in this era, are your Aladdins, your Little Mermaids, your Beauty and the Beast. They all follow the same idea. They have the same types of songs. They have the same lighthearted tone. They have the funny side character. These are the way these films just were done. This is the way that these stories were meant to be told. There wasn't much more to it. This is how these stories acted, and that's just the way it happened. And that was the status quo for many years. And even when you think about today, the movies that they're showing to their kids, it's these types of movies. It's the Little Mermaids, it's the Hercules, it's Mulan even. And it's newer ones as well. It's Frozen, Encanto, whatever it may be. And Hunchback isn't really shown, even though it is such a brilliant film. And the reason why it is, and the reason why, in my opinion, it's such an underrated masterpiece, is because it isn't a typical Disney film. It is a gothic film made by Disney. And I think that is a really great description and a really big distinction. Because when you look at Hunchback of Notre Dame, it is not a film about a hero trying to defeat a villain or getting what they want. It is about a hero who has been prejudiced against and is locked away in a tower with a villain who acts not as someone who's trying to get what they want, but try to preserve what they already have. Which, in my opinion, is a very different type of thing. They're not trying to necessarily get more, at least for the majority of the film, until Frollo starts going after the lead female, who I will not name because some of the names, specifically there is one racial slur that is used many times throughout the film, but that is a big piece of it. And it isn't your typical Disney story, and I think that is such an interesting thing because that isn't what was used to for the time. At the time period, during that time, there was a very set formula. There were things that you expected to get out of a Disney film, and suddenly this film shows up, and it doesn't do that. It defies your expectations for what a Disney film is meant to be. And what I was thinking about when I was thinking about Frollo, when I was reflecting on that character in that film, I really realized that Frollo was actually a character that embodied a Roman emperor. And everything going on in France at the time and things like that were the embodiments of what was going on in Rome. When you look at Frollo, he is someone who's trying to maintain the status quo. And when that group comes into France and tries to tempt that, he pushes them out. He creates these lies. But what Quasimodo acts as is he acts as a physical embodiment of the things Frollo is afraid of. Even though the other group doesn't have anything wrong with them, there isn't any reason for them to be prejudiced, Quasimodo has physical reasons why, even though they're not justified, the reasons why Frollo can pick them out and say this is unnatural or not what we are used to seeing. And I think that is such an interesting plot point because it embodies the prejudice, the fears that people have, and kind of visualizes what some people who are racist or are prejudiced might see in someone who is typically normal. And the reason why I make the Roman Emperor comment is because throughout the film, Frollo is characterized as one of the Roman emperors before Christianity was really involved in the Roman Empire. Because before Christianity was exposed, and prejudiced against, similar to what Frollo does to the community. And more than that, the Roman emperors did not want to defy the pantheon. They did not want to defy the gods. They didn't want to defy like Neptune. They didn't want to defy Jupiter, people like that. And in this film, that pantheon, that mythology is built all into Notre Dame. The Notre Dame acts as more. It acts as they're putting shelter, they're putting Quasimodo into this place of shelter, this peace, because it is someone who's protected. They aren't doing anything wrong, and they're like protected and overseen by this higher power almost, and they aren't any lesser than. But especially in Bells in Notre Dame, one of the best openings to a Disney film, when Frollo looks up at Notre Dame, he sees all the statues staring at him in this negative light, and that's because he's afraid of being looked down upon by whatever higher power there is. Frollo doesn't want to be Frollo believes he's doing the right thing, but he also knows deep down that there are some things that he isn't doing right. When we see during Hellfire, he's not begging for forgiveness, he's saying he did nothing wrong. And eventually he kind of becomes overcome by this feeling that he may have done something wrong. But even if he believes he's fully right, he also understands that some of his actions to get the right thing are not necessarily healthy. And when he looks up at Notre Dame, he has these second thoughts. He says, these statues might be judging me. The higher power might be judging me if I were to drop Quasimodo into the well. And I think that's such an interesting viewpoint of seeing him as kind of someone who wants to follow the gods in a sense that a Roman emperor would have wanted to follow the Roman pantheon. And I think to avoid the wrath of a higher power is such an interesting lens to look at through Frollo's character. Instead of trying to do right, it's to avoid wrong. And I think it puts it in a very interesting perspective. And I think Notre Dame as a character, even though it's a setting, as a character, it acts as a very interesting plot point. Because when you look throughout the film, there are certain times that the building itself is used as more of a character than many of the physical embodiments. More than that, with the Roman emperor comments, he also embodies much of Nero. He burns down much of France, which is obviously the biggest connection. But even more than that, he acts with this kind of resentful iron fist. He does what he has to do to survive. He watches over the city as it burns. He cares not for the civilians, just to get his goal. And I think that's such an interesting way, because Frollo wants to write the narrative of being right and having that ethnic group as being wrong. Well, more than that, it isn't that type of story, and Frollo just wants to weave it that way in the same way Nero and many other Roman emperors did as well. So let's go through the songs. Let's talk about the plot. So the movie begins with Bells in Notre Dame, which is, again, one of the best openings in a Disney film, I'd say, aside from Belle from Beauty and the Beast. And it really does such a great job characterizing the film. And the reason why I say that is because instead of showing how Quasimodo is inside Notre Dame or how Frollo is outside of it, it instead shows how do the people, the civilians, think of what the situation is between Frollo and Quasimodo. Because I think a big piece of this film is not just how Frollo is to Quasimodo or how Quasimodo is affected by Frollo, even though that duality is such an important part of the film. What this opening number does is it shows an outsider's perspective, because a huge part of this film is influence and how a group can work together, or how a group, or mob mentality, how the entirety of France kind of was disbanded under certain ideas, and how mob mentality can be built up or destroyed. And that is a huge motif or big idea or theme of the film. And we see this immediately begin. We are showing the film shows us how different people in the town are told the story of Quasimodo and how they perceive it. They ask the questions like, who is the monster and who is the man, between Quasimodo and Frollo, because they understand that Frollo is doing wrong, and they understand that they fear Quasimodo, but they don't know which emotion is more powerful than the other. So it frames this interesting question: which route do they care more for? Do they care more for their fear, or do they care more for their anger? And it does this really interesting thing where that's how the thing is framed, that's how the story is framed. And it also tells us how much the audience knows about Quasimodo. It tells us a lot about Frollo, but not much about our hero. And what that does is it kind of still frames the story in the sense of the duality of how Frollo wants to write the narrative, how he wants to be the one who's telling the story, while Quasimodo is the real hero, but wants to take a step back. More so in the opening shot, we see Notre Dame above the clouds, again showing this higher power type thing, how Notre Dame is acting as a metaphor for the higher power. Then we see, of course, what I mentioned before with Frollo seeing the statues and that more of the motif for the higher powers. Moving on, we then end with Bells in Notre Dame, an incredible opening again. Now our next number is going to be a big one, which is Out There. This is your classic hero want song, but Quasimodo wants to go out in the world, and we see him dancing around the roof of Notre Dame, on the curve, sliding around, whatever it may be. This number is just incredible, great music. There's not much to say about it. It does a great job explaining how he wants to go out there. He wants to see the world. But in the first number, we already established how the world doesn't necessarily want to see him. In the shot where we see Quasimodo, like the silhouette of him going up the stairs in Bells of Notre Dame, like the puppet, we don't see Quasimodo's face because they don't necessarily want to see it. And that moves into Topsy-Turvy, where we eventually have Quasimodo go out in the world, and they're like, oh, that's a mask, right? Because as much as Quasimodo wants to go out there, once he goes out there, he's met with the mob mentality that isn't described to him within the safety of Notre Dame. Because Notre Dame is meant to represent the higher power, and how within the building, it is based on what necessarily the higher power might want Earth to be, which is this great place where people are kind to each other. While out there, it really is, when they move out into the world during Topsy-Turvy, it isn't like that, and it really is this mob mentality. And even calling it Topsy-Turvy is very important, because it's like showing how the world that everyone thought it was is really flipped on its head. It's Topsy-Turvy. It's saying like, this is what it should be within Notre Dame. That's the way the world should be. And flipped outside of it, this is what the world actually is. And it has this really nice duality. And throughout the film, we see Notre Dame act as this utopia, and the outside world act as a dystopia. And it's a very interesting duality with that. And I really love Topsy-Turvy. It's a really fun number. And it also gives, it begins with Quasimodo getting a taste of what he wants the world to be, what out there, what he believes it is. And then once it turns into what it truly is, then he starts seeing why he doesn't want to be out there. Now, later in the musical, I'm not exactly sure, or in the movie, I'm not exactly sure where the statues come in, but I want to talk about them quickly. The statues are a very interesting character. Number one, I hate their song. Their song's horrible. Number two, I hate their characters. Their characters are horrible. There's only one thing that could possibly redeem the statues, because they're the only thing bringing down the film. More than that, if this theory is true, I've seen many YouTubers talk about it. I even was like thinking about it. It makes a lot of sense. If it's true, it elevates the film higher than it actually currently is. And that's by saying the statues were made up by Quasimodo. Instead of having Quasimodo be with these magical friends, he's imagining the statues because he doesn't have any friends. And when he goes out there, and he imagines the statues as being what people are actually like. They're being kind, they're being helpful. But when he actually goes out there into the world, even as much as he craves to go out there, once he goes out there, he loses those imaginary friends and sees what the world actually is like. And it's a very interesting thing, because we do see the statues do some things, which is why I don't think they're fake. But like, for example, there's a point where like Quasimodo's like breaking free from the chains at the end of the movie, and they're encouraging him, and I think it's meant to kind of act as Quasimodo's like headspace, like trying to push him to be his best self, do what he has to do to survive. While on the other hand, it very well could just be like when he's like out there, when he actually is with people, he does seem a lot happier, because as much as he likes his gargoyle friends, they're not real friends to him. The statues are not real, or at least they're magical, or they're not real, whatever it may be. But I think them being not real kind of shows the hysteria of being out there, and it gives the community of France another reason to be prejudiced against him, because he's making up things in his head. He's not necessarily mentally stable, which gives him another reason to be prejudiced against him, which I think is a really interesting point, because they're suddenly transitioning from saying like, oh, this is just like whatever, I just don't trust this person, to now there's actual reasons. He's making things up in his head. And once he goes out in the world and meets new people, he starts seeing why those statues were partially incorrect of how the real world was, and things like that. And it kind of mirrors how hysteria can act in a person, and also shows more of the impact that Frollo had on Quasimodo. Of course, this is likely not true just because of the way the film portrays it. However, I'd really love it to be. The next number, and we have two more at this point. We have God Help the Outcast. This is just a fun number from Esmeralda. But what, again, this shows, again, the idea of how Notre Dame acts. Because she sings God Help the Outcast, please help the people that are not seen, within the walls of Notre Dame, where she is protected by the higher power. And she's singing this to say, please help the people who are not currently being helped in a place where it is safe. While Frollo's constantly shouting while he burns down France, kill them, kill them, kill them. But he's not within the higher power. He knows that he's being judged. While within Notre Dame, even though Esmeralda knows that they're outcasts, she's willing to say, I understand that I'm an outcast, and please still help us. Please offer us this grace. And it further shows and reveals this kind of motif or metaphor of how Notre Dame functions in this film as a real character, and how she's really praying and how those prayers are eventually answered. And after that, we have our final number aside from the gargoyles, which I'm not talking about, which is our joint number between Quasimodo and Frollo, which is Hellfire and Heaven's Light. And I think this is a good place to talk about the duality of the two characters. Throughout the film, it really establishes that these two characters are two sides of the same coin. They have this great duality. They have these two parts of each other that they just can't solve fully. But what's so interesting about what's really highlighted in this number is the fact that this duality really functions as one greatly affects the other. Because Heaven's Light is told within Notre Dame. It's told while the light is shining and showing, please, this is how it should be. And it's these great shadows, this great lighting. And it's showing how, like, even in darkness, light can be seen. And it does this great function of showing how Quasimodo still has hope. While with Hellfire, which is a number I really want to talk more about, I'll say with Heaven's Light, though, I really like the metaphors of saying, like, please grant these people grace, grant me grace, and then it's done at the top of Notre Dame where light is. While Hellfire, which is the number I want to talk more about, is done within a chamber. It's done in an area where we can't really see. I believe it's outside of Notre Dame. And this is done with Frollo. This is his villain number, but he's not saying, I want this. It's saying, if I don't get this, this is what will happen. It's a very cause and effect number. It's a true villainous motive. And he really is this horrific character. And it shows how it's this duality of saying, instead of being open to Heaven's Light, open to getting what you want, it's more saying, this is what I need, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get it. It's not a prayer, it's a demand. And there's no light, there's just fire, this evil, this thing that he's going to craft. Even though fire can be used for good, he's willing to craft it for evil. And we see the fire dancing from Esmeralda to more evil things and consuming him almost. And we see one point where the fire really dances around him, because it's saying how this anger is consuming him. Because fire can be used for good, but instead it's using him for evil. And he's almost being consumed by the rage. And one of my favorite parts of Hellfire, two of them, is when he's running through the court and he's seeing all these people saying, it's not my fault, it's not my fault. And yet the people are chanting Aladdin, you're my fault. Because it is Frollo's fault that he is doing it, but he doesn't want to admit it to himself. But this is the embodiment of his guilt, and I think it's such a fascinating way to do it. And my other favorite part is at the very ending when he's on his knees and the blue and red crash in, because what the blue and red really do is they act as a visual showing of the duality of the good and the evil, him and Quasimodo. One other brief part is, of course, when the door opens and the white light flashes in and the soldiers at the door. I've heard many people say this is like a higher power, and I do agree that's a great way to say it. It's like this last way of intervention. Please don't do this. Please don't make the mistake. And Frollo makes the mistake, and then he falls on his knees, and you see the red approaching him while the blue is behind him. You see the evil coming towards him, and he's looking at the evil when all of his good is behind him. His shadows are flying away into the blue because that's the past. The future is all evil for him, and that will lead to his demise. But with that, that's an incredible number. I also think Hellfire is one of the best villain numbers ever in Disney. But why is this film underrated? Why is it an underrated masterpiece? Well, in my opinion, there's a very simple reason. It is too mature, too graphic, I guess, for younger kids. And I think if for younger kids, they were able to watch and enjoy this movie, I think if younger kids watch this movie, they wouldn't enjoy it. But if you're a little bit older, like my age, like a little bit older, exiting high school, you're going to enjoy this film a lot more. And I think younger, parents are not showing this to 5-6-year-olds. So it kind of becomes lost, and then there becomes an age where people aren't necessarily diving into old Disney films in the same way, because they're moving on to live action things, television shows, more mature things. So by the time they're able to explore this, it's not necessarily in the same way. Or when they do explore it, it's normally very late. Because when I see people who have seen this film, they normally are ecstatic about it. They love it. They love everything about it. But so many people haven't heard of it or don't know anything about it just because they're either too young or they weren't born during an era where they would have been able to see it. But I do think more people are watching it now that it's becoming more popular and more spoken about on YouTube. I think more people are going to see it. Part of the reason why I make this video is so more people know about it and are going to go watch it. But with that, that's why I really think this is an underrated masterpiece. I explained more of the masterpiece part, but I think the underrated part's quite simple. It's a little bit too mature, a little bit too much of a gothic horror type film. And this film, even though it's brilliant, is not meant for kids. And I think that's the reason why it's so underrated and so secret. But with that, thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.